If you will, open up to John chapter 11. If you've got a paper Bible, go ahead and turn. I like to hear the pages turning. If you have a tablet or a phone, as long as you're not playing one of those games or on Facebook or something, then go ahead and get it out and use it to find John chapter 11. You guys know what the shortest verse in the Bible is, don't you? What is it?
Jesus wept.
Y'all are not reading the NIV. In the NIV, it's Job 3:2, which says, He said. But we've grown up hearing John 11:35, Jesus wept. Today we're going to spend time in John 11. I hope there's something here really worth you hearing and spending some time thinking about. What we're going to do to start off is we're going to read it. It's a long reading. And I know sometimes we kind of get a little bored with those kind of things, but don't. This is the Word of God. Get plugged into it, get your mind into it, and let's read and let's hear what the Word has to say. Now, a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who had anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again? And Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And for your sake I'm glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus was already in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, The teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around." "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and seen what he did, believed in him. Is it all for any length of time? This is a story you have heard. And we always spend time talking about Jesus wept and that he cares about us. I'd like for us to spend a little time kind of looking more at what's going on there. First of all, Jesus finds out that Lazarus is sick. And he stays where he is. And he's have you ever considered, my thought would be for him to go and help, right? Am I the only one who's ever thought that? But let's stop for a second. Let's think about it. How long did Jesus stay where he was? Answer? 2 days. Okay, see, when I ask, I want you to answer back to show that you're engaged. So he stayed there 2 days. How long had Lazarus been in the tomb when Jesus got to Bethany? 4 days. Okay, now for the Jewish people, the day you died is the day you got buried. There wasn't waiting. It wasn't like a couple days later or even a week later. I've never quite gotten that when it's a week later and you're having a funeral. But they were buried on that day. Their idea was that was important and you were unclean and you had to be buried that day. So Lazarus had been buried for 4 days, the day he died. So from the time that they sent, how many days did it take for the messengers to get to Jesus? Have you ever thought about that? Where is Lazarus? What town is he in? Bethany. Jesus is hanging out, we find out from the previous chapter, he's hanging out Bethany over the Jordan. It's a day's travel to get there. Okay, so let's do a little math. They send to Jesus. So the messengers leave. How long is it going to take them to get there? 1 day. How long does Jesus wait? It takes a day for Jesus to get back. How many days have we got? When did Lazarus die? Like before they got to Jesus, Lazarus was already dead. I mean, it wasn't like he just sat there and went. By the way, waiting would have made a difference. Because for the Jewish people, you've got about 3 days that they think you might come back to life. So by waiting 4, guess what? It's not like he performed really great CPR. He really came back from the dead. So it wasn't that Jesus was just hard-hearted. By the way, it's an interesting conversation. Jesus' disciples don't seem to catch what Jesus means most of the time. I wonder that about us too. Because he says that Lazarus has fallen asleep and they say, well, that's a good thing. Let him rest. Jesus says, no, he's died. We're going back. Now, in Jerusalem, in Bethany, where Lazarus and Mary and Martha live, is about 2 miles from Jerusalem. What are they looking to do to Jesus? They're wanting to stone him. They're wanting to kill him. So, going back to that area, what do we know Thomas for? Doubting Thomas. Because Thomas was just like, I can't put my hands in. You think Thomas is the only one of us that would ever have that reaction in that situation? So we call him Doubting Thomas. But when Jesus is going back to Jerusalem and they think he could die there, what does Thomas say? Let's go die with him. I mean, this is some faith, isn't it? Let's cut Thomas a little bit of slack as we go. So when they get there, Martha finds out that Jesus is coming and goes to meet him. And Martha says, if you had... I don't think she's really accusing Jesus, right? Especially if we've got this timeline, right? That he died the first day. He's been dead for 4 days and in the tomb. She's saying the same thing that we say when things happen. Oh, if only. If only. And Jesus' response to her is, your brother will live again. Martha says, I know. The resurrection's coming. When that day comes, he will rise again. Jesus says, that's not what I'm talking about. I am the resurrection and life. If you believe in me, you'll live, even if you die. And this is our hope, by the way. Jesus says, do you believe this? This is the key question. Do you believe that he is the resurrection and the life? Do you believe that he provides? Martha has trouble with the answer. She does not say, yes. She says, you're the Son of God. I mean, read it. That's her response. You're the Christ. You're the one that's coming. We know this. She doesn't yet quite believe. So she goes and tells Mary that Jesus is asking for her. Mary comes out, falls to the ground, and what does Mary say? Now it says that Mary and everyone with her, they are weeping. And Jesus looks. Don't it? I mean, weeping, wept. The thing is, they're completely different words in the original language. He's really, really mourning heavily at a funeral. It's not such a big deal maybe in our culture. I remember when my grandmother died and my aunt, just as we were getting ready to start the funeral, was draped over the casket crying loudly. But that's the kind of thing, just wailing, just says that Jesus, the word for what he did here, is just shedding quiet tears. We often talk about that. We go, why did Jesus weep? That we don't often, I guess I've never actually heard anyone point out. When you're reading it, as Jesus is weeping, in trouble, when he comes to the tomb, Jesus is deeply moved. Now, if you're reading that, you think, oh, he's really sorrowful. He's deeply moved. He's looking around. He's seeing all. The word does not mean deeply moved. I don't know why it's translated this way. In other places, it's never translated this way. The word originally meant like the snort of a horse. It's a word for anger, indignation, and outrage. And Jesus is standing there as people are weeping over the death of Lazarus, and he's angry. And he gets to the tomb, and it says he is angry. A few months ago, I get the anger. Don't you? But let's stop and let's think for a moment. on. He's the Son of God. But he's not just the Word was with God, the Word was God. And he tells us in John 1:14 that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Who is the Word? I heard it. Somebody say it again. Who is the Word? And so if you take Jesus and you replace it back in John 1:1, in the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God, and you maybe that blows your mind, but that's what the Word says, isn't it? Who is standing in front of the tomb? It's not simply Jesus, the Messiah. God, who created everything, is standing in front of the tomb. What was the place of death? Where was the role of death in creation? When we sinned, I can only imagine that as Jesus is standing there, shedding tears of frustration, tears of compassion for those around, and he's looking, and he has just told us he's the resurrection and the life. Death has no place in his world. And he has come to set it right. I am the resurrection and the life. And even though you die, you will live. This is our fierce hope as believers in Jesus. It is not about social justice. It is not about showing up on Sunday so we sing beautiful songs. It is about the resurrection and the life, and we will not die. And Jesus steps to the tomb, has them roll the stone away, and with a loud, raw shout, it's not just the kind of shout that tears your throat up. He says, "Come forth." And Lazarus comes forth. Notice we didn't read the rest of that chapter. I don't understand the rest of the chapter. Because some people who were standing there and saw that went and told the Pharisees, and the Pharisees said, "Great, now we have to kill Lazarus too." I don't get it. I don't understand it. The nature of God was that this world was created not to be a place of death and destruction, but to be His kingdom. Through our sin, we have brought death and destruction into this world. That's truth, isn't it? And it is. When some guy could get a room and kill 60 people and wound how many others? And we sit there and we go, when we get past all the political stuff, we go, how in the world can this happen? Who can be this evil? How can death be like this? When we see a strong 17-year-old young man who falls to death because of cancer, brain cancer, and we say, this world is not the way it's supposed to be. When we look around and we see people hurting each other, and we see abuses, and we see all the stuff that happens, and in our heart, This place is so broken. We remember that the one who created it feels that way too. Give us a nice little club that we can meet with on Sunday, but to make all things new, to put things right, to give us purpose and meaning and hope, even in the face of the darkness of death. And yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I am the resurrection and the death, or the resurrection and life. Do you believe this? That's the question today. I hope you can answer yes.